Hang on, Rudy Giuliani. Hello, the attorney for the president is with us now. Longtime friend of mine, Mr. Mayor. Good to see you. And I said this to Jay and you
Sean. It's a
privately.
good night.
I know you work tirelessly. I know you guys didn't sleep, and well, it's true.
It's worth it. To defend an innocent man and see justice done is the ultimate goal of any lawyer. It was an honor for me to work on this case, and to see it turn out such a complete victory. I've never seen a declination letter, which is what this is, so powerful. Usually prosecutors just say, we're not going to go forward with the case.
That's it.
Mueller put in this thing about, he didn't commit a crime, but I can't exonerate him. That is totally unprofessional. You're not supposed to say that. Then Barr and Rosenstein kind of knocked the obstruction thing right out of the park.
Well, Mueller did hand it back to Rosenstein,
well, because the guy got paid somewhere upwards of $30 million, but he couldn't make the key decision. His hands were shaking. He probably had, he had Jekyll and Hyde. He had the bad guys and the good guys. That little cheap shot probably got stuck in there somewhere along the way by Weissman, who tortured Manafort, who tried to get Corsi to perjure himself, who jammed up Flynn in a really pathetic false statement case.
I want him to pull back that plea.
How about if they don't prosecute Cohen? They got to pull back the plea. Cohen lied brazenly to Cummings. Cummings said he'd throw the book at him. The book hasn't been thrown yet. And I was just on Chris Cuomo's show and told him he'll be the first witness. Well, he's the guy on the other network. I told the other network.
There is no other network.
I told the other network they got to apologize.
Chris is a good guy. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
I said they got to apologize, and I told them you're the first witness because you got the tape that proves he's a perjurer. There were 13 witnesses to his perjury.
Well, there are a lot of tapes involved in this case, according to my sources. Mr. Mayor, if we don't get this right, this was an attempt to rig an election. This was an attempt to undo an election. If we don't get to the bottom of it, starting with Hillary, what happens?
Yeah. Well, this is even more than that. To me, as a lawyer and former prosecutor, this was a massive attempt to frame the President of the United States and to hijack the American electorate. This was an attempt to take out the President of the United States. And we don't have to go much further than the text of Peter Strzok. It was first an attempt to prevent him from becoming president, and then it was an insurance policy to take him out if he was the president. And I know Peter Strzok is involved. He has got to be prosecuted or has to be prosecuted for conflict of interest. His wife, who was working for the company that got $1 million, has to be prosecuted for conflict of interest. But here's the big question.
Real quick, we got to go.
This wasn't made up. Who came up with this story first?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll have you back.
I have a good idea, but I got to prove it first.
Joining us now, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman, Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator, a lot of this falls now on your shoulders. I see you laughing, but
no, I've enjoyed listening.
Anything that you heard me say that's wrong?
No, I mean, we're not going to try these people on cable television. We're going to put it through the rule of law, right? That's what you want.
Whoa,
That's what
totally agree. I believe in due process, the presumption of innocence.
Absolutely, and you've been consistent on that. Here's what I want to find out. Did they exonerate Clinton because they had a political bias? Did they ignore all the facts because if they indict her, they know she can't beat Trump and they wanted Trump to lose? Was the counterintelligence investigation a backdoor way of spying on Trump? There's real no evidence of working with Russia. They just used it as an excuse. Was the FISA warrant obtained unlawfully based on fraudulent documentation to surveil the campaign? Those are the things that I think you want to know about and I want to know about.
What will you do? Tell us the steps that you will take. You will play
Great question.
A very pivotal role here, sir.
First thing I want to do is find out why they got a warrant against Carter Page if the dossier was a bunch of garbage. What did you have beyond the dossier? Why didn't you listen to Bruce Orr? At the end of the day, how could you use this document, this unverified to this day, to get a warrant on 4 different occasions? I want to find out all about that. I want to know if the email investigation was basically dropped because they had a political bias. I want to know if the counterintelligence investigation, why didn't you warn Trump that you thought the Russians were trying to infiltrate his campaign? Why didn't you tell him what you told Dianne Feinstein?
Right.
Well, so the reason I think they didn't tell him about the Russians infiltrating his campaign is that they wanted to infiltrate his campaign, not the Russians.
All right. Senator, I know that you have and by the way, there are a lot of good people that have been very helpful in all this, and Meadows and Jordan and Ratcliffe and all these people. You now have the ability to make public, and the president will have the ability to make public the FISA warrants, the 302s, the Gang of Eight information, and these other buckets, the 5 buckets I always talk about. How important is it that the American people see that, besides the Mueller, conclusions?
I've been pretty consistent. I said I thought Mueller was the right guy to look into the allegations against President Trump. He was a man of the law. He had a great reputation. And I fought to make sure he could do his job. He has rendered his verdict. There is no collusion. Now it's time to look at how this got off the rails. So what am I going to do? I'm going to use every tool available to me, disclose as much as I can without compromising source and methods to make sure the public understands how their president could be accused of working with a foreign government when there's real no basis in fact. This should scare everybody. Did the investigators, did the prosecutors use the law for political purposes? If that turns out to be true, that is bigger than Watergate. Did they try to take him down after he got elected? Was there a real effort to invoke the 25th Amendment?
Looks like
it. I don't know, Sean, but nobody seems to give a damn but me and you and a few other people. If it had been Republicans hiring Steele to spy on Clinton, and they used a dossier prepared by Steele against Clinton associates that was a bunch of political garbage, it'd be front page news everywhere.
Lies, Senator. Ironically, Russian lies.
I think so. I told Trump that. I think the dossier came from Russia. Mr. President, if you think the Russians are just out to help you, they're not. They're out to destroy America, and they're basically using both campaigns.
You really had a moment in the Kavanaugh case. A lot weighs on your investigation, and your pledge tonight is so important to getting to the truth so this never happens again, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Now that Robert Mueller's Russia probe is in the rearview mirror, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham is among those calling for a full accounting of the bias and conspiracy at the top of the FBI and Justice Department to keep then-candidate Trump out of the White House.
What makes no sense to me is all the abuse by the Department of Justice and the FBI, the unprofessional conduct, the shady behavior. Nobody seems to think that's much important. Well, that's going to change.
Senator Graham then responded to a somewhat cryptic tweet seen here from fired FBI Director Jim Comey, in which Comey said, quote, "So many questions." Well, Graham shot back, "Could not agree more. See you soon." So what happens now? Let's ask my next guest, House Oversight Committee member, South Carolina Congressman Ralph Norman. What does happen now with regard to what Lindsey Graham was saying? Do we have a Senate investigation? Because it'd be unlikely that Nancy Pelosi in the House would order one.
No, she wouldn't. And, it's a sad day, because it ought to be a great day in America. Great day for the president, and to drag the country through another, what we've just been through of 2 years is unfair. I think Senator Graham is dead on. Let's find out why this got to the point going back from July of 2016 on a phony dossier. So I think he's right to get the people in here and question them and see. Let's let them answer some questions. It just didn't turn out like, for the last 2.5 years, didn't turn out like the Democrats wanted. And Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler owe this country an apology, because it's not right to convict somebody before they've had their day. They've had their day now, and it just didn't turn out like they thought.
Well, what's really concerning, and it was concerning way back with Richard Nixon, and it's just as concerning now, is whether the FBI was weaponized, whether the powers of the FBI, the powers of the Justice Department, which are incredibly powerful. I mean, you think of their subpoena power, you think of their investigative, or some would say spying power. Those powers were used for political purposes, it seems, by some who were determined to keep Donald Trump out of the White House.
And go back to the beginning, the dossier by Glenn Simpson, and to get a FISA warrant to spy on individual Americans when they didn't check it out. It was never the FBI had the opportunity and the duty to. They set the gold standard for investigations before they make it public. And this has been the most publicized collusion delusion in the history of this country, which is sad. And it's sad for the American people. And what's been lost in the transition, look at the price tag. If you do the math, whether it's 25 million or 28 million, it comes out to $50,000, over $50,000 a day. Is that right? The taxpayers shouldn't have to bear that expense. And if Democrats want to keep it going, let it come out of their pocket. Let them pay for it.
Yeah, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but what concerns me more than the money is the fact that the powers of this government, the awesome powers of the United States government, were used for political purposes to spy and overturn an election result. But even before then, of course, before the election is when a lot of this investigation and work by FBI folks who were determined to keep Donald Trump from getting elected were at work. Do you think the Obama administration was at the time somehow involved, because clearly it happened at the Justice Department in part?
Well, if you're going to start looking at things as to why, I think they entered the picture, and it's a question that should be asked, because what happened to Donald Trump, just like you just mentioned about weaponizing the FBI, who sets the gold standard, should not happen, and it should happen to anybody. And as the president said, any president should not have to go through this. So I think hopefully they'll do that.
You know, the president himself has the power to declassify certain things that people would love to get a look at. You mentioned the FISA warrants and exactly what was used to obtain that warrant that was used to spy on an American citizen. The president has the power to declassify. Should he? And why doesn't he?
Absolutely. We voted in Congress 420 to nothing to put the Mueller report out there for the Americans to see. Now, if you roll the clock back and look at the dossier to declassify that, we didn't get any Democrat votes. When we were down there looking at it, I don't think any Democrats at the time came to even look at it, because they knew, I think, deep down where it came from.
Right.
They knew that the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton had something to do with it. But all that is so sad to let it go to this point. 2.5 years later, or over 2 years, with the amount of money, and then to find that there's nothing to it, and to put the American people through that is not right, and it shouldn't happen to anybody else.
You know, Congressman, it was ill-conceived from the beginning. There was no crime. You don't set up a special counselor unless you have a crime, then you investigate the crime. There was no crime. They just opened the investigation to look into this question of Russian collusion without a crime having been committed. Go ahead, quick final word.
Other than Fox, look at the news media that convicted this president before anything was explored. It's not right. I'm glad it came out like it did. It's a great day for this country.
Congressman Norman, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.